We are so excited to be here this Wednesday afternoon for our first ever book club in our hangout. So, this is super exciting. Our book is designed for how people learn, and we're really excited to be talking through this book with you and sharing some of the nuggets that we picked up in the book, and really excited to learn what you picked up from your studies. This is a really phenomenal book produced by Julie Dirksen. And if you haven't read it yet, don't worry about it. You can still learn from other people as we discuss it. And I did notice through the sign up form that we have both like brand new instructional designers, people who are aspiring to be instructional designers, and experienced instructional designers who are participating in this book club. So that's a really great place for us to be, because we can hear and learn from the experiences of everyone, no matter where they are on their instructional design journey. So here with me, I have Joanie Musser. She is one of our alumni in our instructional design and tech accelerator program. She is what I call a mega learner, a prolific learner. Every time I talk to Joanie, she's telling me, well, oh, I'm in this class, or I just did this, or I participated in this event. So she is the perfect person to be leading us through this book study. I'm so excited to have you here with us, Joanie. So thank you for organizing this. And I'm going to turn this over to Joanie to get us started.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm so excited that you all are joining us for this. This is something that I have been wanting to do for several months. I got a quick question for everybody. Does your book look like mine? Well, it's kind of blurry, but do you see all the tabs I have? All right. I've read more than chapters 1 through 3 already, but I reread them so that I can guide you all through this study. Here's our first question. While you were reading any of the 3 chapters here, what was your aha moment? Did you have one? Did something that Julie Dirksen wrote make you go, wow, I never thought of it that way? Or, oh my gosh, this is a revolution or a revelation to myself, that you thought, I'm going to apply this now next time I design a course, or the next time I work with a subject matter expert trying to put together what we need to work with for our learners. So what are some of your aha moments? Go ahead and throw them in the chat for us. Aha moment. The gap may not be knowledge. So it might be the course is not a solution. I love that. That was from Melanie. Melanie's telling us that it's not always a solution that you need to write a course. Sometimes it could be like a job aid, right?
Yeah, I love that. My biggest aha moment came in chapter 3. And what I love about Julie's book, it doesn't matter where you are on your journey, there is something in this book for you. So you could be brand new and there is so much in there, or you could be experienced. You could be like, oh yeah, that's a really great way of looking at this. So whenever I was reading through chapter 3, there were a bunch of things in chapter 3. Like, I like the scale of proficiency and like the different, I think it was Thalheimer's learning objective descriptions. I thought those were all really cool, the way that those were presented. But I kind of broke it out whenever I wrote some notes down about 3. But so whenever you are talking about like, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? Where is the learner today? Where do you want the learner to be? And then what's the bridge? But like, the thing that really stood out to me is like really thinking about, well, how far do you want to take that learner, right? Because you're not always taking the learner from beginning all the way to the end. You're moving them along a continuum. And so sometimes you've got to define what that is. Like, we're not expecting people to be experts in some cases with some of the learning solutions that we create, but it's like, it was like, oh man, I've never really thought about like, where does like, what's the key point that I need them to arrive at? So that was like my aha moment in that. I thought that was a really good one.
Yeah, I agree with that one. It makes you really kind of take a step back and think about where they're going and what that end product really looks like, especially if any of you do use backward design, and you really have to think about what is it at the end that we want them to learn, and then design backward from that. That's kind of what it made me think of, Shawntay, when you were saying that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to let you know, page 29 is where Katie got her idea of what type of learner she is. And somebody else mentioned all of the different types of learning gaps. So page 20, if you take a look at page 20 really quick, page 20 not only lists all the different types of learning gaps, but it gives you the questions that you can ask so that you can identify what type of learning gap your learners may have. So I really like that piece there too. Page 21 is what I believe Melanie was referring to. So you can ask this question: what do they actually need to do with this information? How are they going to actually apply it in the real world? And I think that's the theme that you're going to see throughout the book, that Julie keeps asking us is this what the learner's really going to use? Why do they need to know this information? Or why do they need to apply this information? What difference is it going to make in what they do every day? On page 35, the title says your learners want to not feel stupid, right? Don't you want everybody that you're working with to feel that they have some knowledge, because you want to excite them and motivate them, right? Well, at the bottom, that's what it says here. Your job is to make your learners feel smart. It doesn't matter their learning ability. It doesn't matter their level of experience. You want them to feel smart. Even more importantly, they should feel capable. And I thought, you know what? That's something that I'm going to pin up and make sure that I keep that in the back of my mind when I'm designing my learner personas and when I'm working with the actual design of, or I should say, yeah, the design of what I'm putting together.
I just want to add to that. Even in leadership and leadership trainings and things like that, you often hear that it's important to create small wins or small successes along the way. So when we're talking about making a learner feel smart or making them feel capable, it's about building in those success points along that path. So there is some correlation to some of the other types of development that we're doing, where we're developing leaders, we're talking about developing learning solutions. And I think it's just good in practice, where anytime we're learning something new, if we run into a bunch of obstacles, like where we keep failing, we're not going to want to keep learning that, right? We'll be like, oh, I suck at this. I'm never going to be good at this. But if we build in those wins along the way for our learners, then the experience is better. They enjoy it more. They feel like they get more value out of it. And for sure, the rating probably at the end of the learning experience will be higher because people felt good in it. So it's about creating that safe path for them and to make it safe for them to learn in that environment. So I thought that was a really good one too. I had written down an aha. I kind of, I didn't just do it for chapters 1 through 3. I wrote it down for 1, 2, and 3. But for 2, that is what I wrote down about making them feel smart. So I thought that was a really good one.
Oh, April's on here. Hey, April. Yeah, page 35, just what Shawntay was talking about. We have to make them feel comfortable and acceptable and create that environment that they're going to feel safe learning and safe to make mistakes, especially when we're doing our messy first drafts of things.
Yep.
And we want someone to look at it, right? I don't want to hand it over and someone tell me, oh, this is really just horrible. And I'm like, oh, I tried so hard. At least find some successes in what I did or what you're doing for the learners that you're putting things together for. Okay, so let's look at question 2 now. Since we keep talking about our learner personas, let's reflect on one. Maybe you've created one for a training. Maybe you created one for a portfolio asset. What should you know about your learners before designing a learning solution? Go ahead and put your answers in the chat. We'll give you a second to think about it. What should you know about them before designing that learning solution?
What I love about chapters 1, 2, and 3, and I think that you said this in our prep call, is that we're really getting into analyzing, right? We're analyzing what the problem is that we're trying to solve, what the needs of the learner are. So I really love how much time that Julie in her first 3 chapters has really invested in this analysis piece, because it's so important to make sure that we're on the right track, that we hit that right destination as our final outcome.
Let's see. Chris says exactly what they need to be able to do after the training. Yes, we need to be able to design for exactly that. Melanie says motivation.
Hmm. Why
Yes.
are they here? Why are they learning? Yes.
And what is their motivation? There's that whole chart that is in here about the different types of motivation. You know, you have some of those learners who come in and they're like, why am I here? I already know this. They may not know everything, but they think they do. And we have to find a way to turn that around. You might
Or
have
they
some
were voluntold. They have to.
the voluntold. Absolutely. Yeah, I have to be here. I have to do this. Or our learners who just think that it's a waste of their time. When am I ever going to use this? And we have to kind of turn that around. So I think that is something that we need to know about before designing the learning solution. Did anybody find it interesting that doing the walkthrough, like going through and talking to learners before you design the training and getting their perspective?
Yeah, it's to me, whenever I have the opportunity to do this when building learning solutions, it's always it's so eye-opening, like how the learner will describe what their needs are versus what management believes their needs are. There's usually a pretty big gap in between, like what a learner thinks what they need and what management thinks they need. And then as an instructional designer, like how are we threading, between those two to make sure that we're meeting the needs of both? So I think that's really a really interesting conundrum that we can sometimes find ourselves in.
So page 55 talks about that. If you have your book, turn there. This is actually one of my aha moments as well. You know, she has 3 bullets right at the top, Julie does, and it says, talk about your learners, follow your learners around, try stuff out with them. So if you've already kind of put some questions together or you put a little learning experience together or scenario, have them try it out in a less formal environment and see how they respond to it. And I thought that was kind of genius too. The other thing that I was thinking about when I was reading that section was, you know, what's the difference between what that experienced person on the job does versus someone who's less experienced? And if I'm building this training for both of them, where is the gap between what that less experienced person or person knows, and how do I merge that gap? Is it only knowledge, or does it have to do with their experience and maybe the way they're performing that skill? And could a training not be necessary if the less experienced employee just job shadows the other one and learns a little? Sarah says, I agree with so many of these. Her first thing is their past experiences. I like to know where they're coming from. And a lot of the time, the answer is they're coming from all over the place. They have so much experience, and maybe we just need to kind of like reel them in and decide which part of their experiences really relate to the skill or the element that we're trying to teach or put in our training. And then you got to think about, okay, is it a knowledge gap? Is it a motivation gap again? And if you guys look at, I know this is back in chapter 1, but this takes me back to page 14 when we're talking about habit gaps. So think about that experienced learner or participant in your course. What if you're having to show them something that's a new way of doing what they've already done for years and years and years? You have to break that habit. I think Sarah brought this up in one of the chats earlier, unlearning something to relearn it. And does anybody remember what the book said, what Julie says about how we get them to unlearn and relearn? It's practice. You have to include a lot of practice. I remember saying a lot when I was years ago, I used to say to my students, practice is not, or I would have them finish my sentence. I would say, practice makes, and they would say, perfect. And I would say, no, it doesn't. Practice makes permanent. Practice is what gets you in the habit of doing something. So if you have to break a habit, you have to practice a different way. And that takes repetition, time after time after time. So keep that in mind. That's one of those gaps that we might find happening, even if the person is experienced.
It's funny, Joanie, as a parent, whenever I go to help my daughter with math and the way that they do math, like I have to unlearn the way that I learned to do math because the way that they are teaching kids today is totally different. So every time I go into it, I'm just like, if they would just do it this way, or why are they making this so complicated? But and this school is really smart because they send home like a how to for parents so that we learn how to do the new math. But once I get through it, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. But I had a natural resistance because I had already learned one way. It was already automated for me. So I had to practice it a new way in order to see the value in that. I think that with your person that's already experienced one way, sometimes it can be a little bit harder because you have to break some habits, you have to introduce a new way of learning, but there is a natural resistance or friction in that. So where a newer person might come in and just be like, oh, so this is how you do it, and this is great. Somebody that's already experienced in one way, it's kind of like a change management, right? Like you have to like break through some barriers. I think that what Julie had written, if I remember, because I took a note down for something else that I'm working on for someone that I'm coaching. And it says that there's a lot of backsliding and grumpiness that comes with this unlearning. And trust me, whenever I'm talking about the new way of doing math, I've had a lot of grumpiness and a lot of backsliding where I'm like, here, let me just show you how to do it like this, which is not right. I should have just plugged into the new way. But yes.
If you all look at page 42 in your book, there is a little section there. I'm going to turn there real quick too. That talks about scaffolding, and that some of you are educators currently. Some of you are transitioning out of the world of K to 12, or maybe you're just aspiring to do something different with instructional design. But we've all had to deal with scaffolding our instruction, and that is so that we can meet the learners where they are and have those different levels for instruction or for to close that learning gap. So, you wouldn't give a beginner the hardest thing to do because it might frustrate them, right? So we're going to scaffold it. We're going to break it down. And what it comes to my mind is in the past, when we've built instruction, we will do what I call the I do, where I show you what you need to know and I model it for you. We do it together. Here's a little activity that we're all going to try out and see how we do well or learn from our mistakes. And then there's the you do. Show me what you know. Show me what you learned. Reflect on it. Demonstrate what you can do, right? So I do, we do, you do. But if you look on page 43, so start on page 42 where the title is Scaffold the Incline. Go over to page 43, the first bullet. Reduce the complexity of the environment. Now, this made me think. It says, to scaffold their learning experience, you can fade out all but a few of the key controls for the first scenarios. So, and then you gradually add those controls back in. Here's what she's actually saying. Turn it around. Do the you do first. Show me what you know. Then when you see what they're not understanding, pull back a little bit. Work on those specific elements that they're not understanding or they're not successful with. And then if there's still an element that they're not very good with, then you can pull back and it could be direct instruction. What I'm saying is do a one-on-one with the learner if necessary. Have a conversation with them, show them specifically. So it's turning it around. It's a flip. So in this time we're doing the you do. Now let's do it together because I see where you're struggling. And now I see you're struggling more. I'll do it. And then you give it back to them and have them do it again. So it kind of reverses that scaffold a little bit. And I thought that was interesting. What do we have here on page 65? Learning objectives. Do any of you know what we start most our learning objectives with? Yep, Abby's like, it looks like Bloom's taxonomy. You got it. So here's what I think is very interesting with this section. I marked page 68 and 69 because if you read what it has said, Julie says to flip it. So you'll notice on page 68, the chart she gives, where it has the taxonomy, it doesn't start with remember or knowledge at the bottom. It starts with create. Give the learners elements, a product, a photo, something, and have them do of course, if it's like graphic design, have them do the mock-up of the advertisement. Um, she has another way of looking at it by scaling it on page 69. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense, because what we're really doing here is evaluating, is this something the learner will actually be able to do in the real world, and how will we know? That's the second question. How can we tell if they've done it? If we reverse the Bloom's taxonomy and we have them create it first, then we can identify what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and fill in that gap.
It's
Strong
one of
action verbs. Yep, Katie.
It's
Shawntay?
one of the things that we do in our training needs analysis too. Like whenever we are working with our stakeholders or clients, whoever they are, and we're talking about the learning experience, what does success look like, right? Because that is how we expect our stakeholders to identify whether or not, or one of the ways that we expect our business owners to evaluate whether the training or the learning solution was worthwhile. Did it change a certain behavior? Did it, change an OKR or influence an OKR in some way? So always asking, what does success look like, I think is an important question.
Absolutely. And you're working with a subject matter expert or a stakeholder, and they can't define for you exactly what they want success to look like, then we have few more questions to ask before we can move on without designing that, right?
Right. And I
Um,
also I also like though that Julie says, like, one of her prompts in there is like, what's the negative consequence of not doing this, right? So it's not just about success and thinking about, okay, if everything goes well and this is successful, what does that look like? But the other question, probably even the more important question, is what's the negative consequence if we don't get this right?
right, because that could really affect those KPIs as well.
Yeah, it can affect KPIs. Sometimes people are in our learning experiences that we create because there's something about their job that they're not doing well at. So let's say we miss the mark on it and then they're not improving in their performance. So maybe they don't get a merit increase or a pay raise, or maybe ultimately they get let go in some way. So sometimes there are some really negative consequences that can be associated with missing the mark on being successful.
Question number 3, how have you applied, or how will you apply an idea or ideas discussed in these chapters?
Or if you haven't yet made the transition into instructional design, you're still working through that, you could be thinking, you could answer this question with how you might apply it in the future, right? You don't have to have an actual example, but you might have some ideas about how you might use it. And let me just put out there that our community is safe. We know that we are all on a learning journey. So don't feel like you're going to put something out there and be judged for it, because this group is about lifting each other up and not being like, oh, no, that's not right. So don't worry about that. Put whatever ideas you have out there and let us help you build on that. So feel like this is a safe space for that.
Rishmi talks about learning objectives, and she still struggles sometimes to frame them. Girl, I do too. I look at learning objectives a lot that other people have written,
Yes, we
and I
do.
have to reword them. And sometimes I struggle with that. What exactly are they trying to say here? What do they want their learner to do? I get that totally. Katie, you and I must have like the same brain wave here, because I was going to go right there. I'll be thinking about what is a fast or a slow skill and how to build around each of those. It's exactly what I have. If you want to know what we're talking about, it's on page 77. That's the page I was trying to flip to a second ago when I accidentally pulled the wrong tab. And I even made a note in my book. It's easy to implement those right away skills for immediate impact. But sometimes some skills are going to take a little bit more time. And so we have to be able to identify those fast versus slow. Perfect. April says she's going to be leveraging the experts more in classes to help with the novices. Oh, what a great idea. Like pair up the more experienced learner with someone who doesn't have that much experience and have them learn from each other. I love that.
This has been super fun. Joanie, thank you so much for leading this today, organizing this. And I love how y'all tell me what you think. I love how Joanie came with like the page numbers. Look at this page number. Thank you for doing this. And thank you to everyone who participated.